an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, hello there. Look at that. The 5th day of October already. We're heading for a long holiday weekend in this part of the world. Thanksgiving. And here in Toronto, anyway, it still feels like the middle of August. Stinking hot. Little muggy, sunny, but looks like the forecast is going to turn autumnal just in time for our Thanksgiving celebrations here. Welcome in. Dave Trafford here. It's Now and Next for Story Studio Network. And it's been kind of a wild week. If you were listening yesterday, you know we added to the family, which was fun. He's good. Yep. Elliot is doing well. James is taken to being a thoughtful big brother. So it's all good. And thanks for the notes, by the way. I have posted pictures, yes, on my Facebook page if you want to check them out. At Dave Trafford finds me on Facebook. Also finds me on Instagram and Twitter or X. I'm on Threads as well and LinkedIn, all at Dave Trafford. But if you want to see the pictures of Elliot, they're on the Facebook feed. So there you go. So yeah, it was a bit of a wild week. Got back onto the ice with the old boys playing hockey. And a lot of griping and moaning because, you know, the Blue Jays coughed up their coaching staff to an algorithm. Really? Analytics in a game like that? If you didn't watch the game, you're not a baseball fan, don't worry about it. But they've effectively gone to statisticians and computer projections in terms of how they play the game. So if you thought baseball was boring already, it got boringer. Too bad, because it would have been fun to see them make a run. All right, here we go. A couple things next week. I'm going to highlight a series that we've been working on with the folks at Daily Bread Food Bank here in Toronto. You'll know by now that we do a lot of mission-driven shows. One of them we talked about yesterday with Sue Larkin at Look Good, Feel Better. Their show's coming out in November. It's called Facing Cancer Together. I know, but it's important. It's important to have that level of community. And I can't imagine anybody who's, that you have not been touched by cancer in your life. Whether it's a family member, a friend, a colleague, maybe you. That whole level of community kicks in, and it's really important, especially when it's happening to you. All of a sudden, and we were talking to Sue yesterday, all of a sudden, you become other. You don't share certain level of, familiarity with people because all of a sudden you've got the diagnosis. And I remember watching my dad go through that. Right. And so I think that this is about, or started an organization that focused on women who were diagnosed with breast cancer and were being treated. But it goes way beyond that now. That idea of providing social community support. Yeah. And they do great work. So if you missed yesterday's episode, I would encourage you to kind of dip back into it and give it a listen. And for all of the, excitement that we have been celebrating here in our family with the new arrival, that was one thing. But I got to tell you, it was Sunday night, I think, and I'm thumbing through my Facebook feed, and I came across a post by my buddy, Barrie Shepley. Barrie is a co-founder of Personal Best. It's, for all intents and purposes, a personal fitness organization. And he and his partners, included his wife, Caron, and Sheldon Prasad, started this thing back in 1991. And they have gone on to do really phenomenal things in terms of the athletes that they train. Now, I really brought down the average when they gave me their coaching and coaxing. But you know what? They got me from 0 to 26.2 miles in just over 12 months back then. And I did so on a bum knee and everything else. And their whole team helped me do that. And I did it several times. But they have coached Olympians to medals, to podiums. And I was crushed this weekend to hear that Caron, Barrie's wife, passed away. She'd been living with cancer for the past 5 years, and I knew that she was not well. But and again, it's one of those things where it happens, and it's coming. But wow, it was just a shock. And I say that because Barrie, all the way through our relationship, and I for the years I've known him, he was always the same guy. He was never on, he was never performing. He was always is always an incredibly optimistic, positive character, and who's self-aware, had good humor, shared that, and was, in a strange way, is his secret sauce in creating success for others. So he's written a book called Chasing Greatness. And I talked to him a little while ago about it. And we're going to feature some of that because you got to hear his story. But Caron's celebration of life is coming up next weekend. And, a lot of people reaching out and so on. Want to go, can't go, whatever. And Barrie being Barrie, he's, being ever accommodating and so on. But between now and then, the 15th of October, he's been posting his Caron stories on his Facebook page. And I would encourage you to go and look it up. Barrie, like the city, Barrie, Shepley, Shepley. And he's telling these phenomenal stories and how important Caron was to his success. So I've told this story many times before, but, the long and the short of it is Barrie effectively became the first national triathlon coach in this country. And that not only did he do that, he was the coach at the 2000 Summer Games in Australia, in Sydney. And not only did he do that, he coached Simon Whitfield in that race. And not only did he do that, he coached Simon Whitfield to a gold medal. The first gold medal in men's triathlon Olympic competition ever. So, that in and of itself kind of sets him apart. And again, because of his character and his personality. But today he tells this story about arriving in Sydney. So he's in Sydney, of course. Simon's in Sydney, and they're all getting ready for the race. And Caron is there, his wife, her sister Jill, her mom, and her aunt are there. And they're all trying to get a ticket to the event. Needless to say, it was a pretty popular event. So today in his post, he says, for over a year, Caron and I had tried to buy tickets for the men's triathlon. Unfortunately, it was sold out. Caron and I were up to $1,000 Canadian for one ticket for Caron to watch the event live on the Opera House steps. Weeks and weeks of beating the bushes for one ticket, found none. Caron wasn't angry. She planned to be with her family out in the streets of Sydney watching the race from the street with the other 300,000 spectators. But I made Caron promise she would go to a small hotel 1 block from the Opera House on race morning. I promised her I would find a ticket for her. I spoke to her at 9 p.m. the night before Simon's big race. I still didn't have a ticket. She promised me she'd go to the hotel. Now, I know in her heart she never believed I would find a ticket. Just 90 minutes before the famous Sydney 2000 men's triathlon, Sheila O'Kelly heard of my dilemma. She contacted me at the race venue and said she had a ticket. Now, this is the part of the story that's rarely believed when I tell it, says Barrie. Hand to God, Sheila gave me the envelope and didn't ask for anything. I promised her I would compensate her after the race was over. I ran 400 meters to the small hotel and left the envelope. I was so excited. Caron would be on the Sydney Opera House steps watching Simon race in less than 2 hours. Well, here's where the universe has some real karma. Caron did as she promised. She went to the small hotel front desk, asked if there was an envelope for her. To her amazement, there was. She opened the envelope and was shocked. There in the envelope, just 75 minutes to the start of the Olympic men's race, was not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 VIP tickets to the finishing line area. Caron, her sister Jill, her mom, and her aunt now all had VIP tickets. They were 40 feet to the finish line and just a few rows up from the blue carpet that Simon would run past a few hours later. And add to the universe's karma, the person sitting next to Caron and her family was Linda Whitfield, Simon's mom. When Simon ran across the finish line a few hours later, the only picture in the world of Linda Whitfield was from Caron's camera. While all the cameras were pointed on Simon winning the Olympic gold medal, it was Caron's brilliance to capture the picture of Linda. Caron and her family were so Canadian proud, singing "O Canada" at the top of their lungs as Dick Pound put the gold medal around Simon's neck that September day. 8 hours later, I'd finally catch up with Caron, Jill, Alice, and Aunt Claire as Simon and I finally got through all the drug testing and the CBC interviews and the final press conference in the IBC. What had begun as young Simon doing his first ever race in my Kids of Steel series 13 years before would culminate that night with Simon putting the gold medal around Caron's neck and generously recognizing her immense role in 100% supporting me emotionally, financially, so that I could put all my energy into helping our team to Sydney and finally Simon's amazing gold medal run. And the story goes on. There's other elements to it. And he talks about Simon being this young kid in his Kids of Steel program. And I was doing a radio show at the time at 640 in Toronto. And Barrie joined me and we did it together. And, this teenage kid, this phenom, Simon Whitfield, nobody knew anything about, was on the show. And I still remember those conversations and how confident he was. But he was a character and he showed this, personal strength because of a guy like Barrie. Now, I'm sure he picked the right parents and everything else. But there is a guy who coached him from the Kids of Steel to an Olympic gold medal. And Caron was a key part of that huge success. So in his book, Chasing Greatness, Barrie tells those kinds of stories. So I'm going to play an interview that I had with him a while back. This is after the book was released. And it was just over 30 years since he and Caron and Sheldon Prasad launched Personal Best. And at the time, back in the early 90s, it was kind of this hip, cool thing. I get a personal trainer. But at the same time, it was a rough start for them in those days. Anyway, I want you to meet Barrie. And this is a really good example of who he is and what he's done. And of course, through all of it, he did so with the support and love of his Caron. So take me back, because, you and Sheldon Prasad, your partner in crime, and your wife Caron, kind of all collectively as the group were committed to Personal Best. And it was a personal training fitness program. And it all, at the time, it was almost kind of this de rigueur thing. If you had a personal trainer, man, you were living right. And it just sounded like the coolest thing to do on the planet. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, holy shit, you guys struggled.
Oh, no. Yeah, there's no question about it. In fact, there are some that come from, maybe some family wealth, or they're backed by something. We were backed by $2,500 we collectively had, and we took a little tiny 12 by 18 foot room on Lawrence Avenue in Bathurst in Toronto. They rented us one room, and literally if a client came, Caron and the other two people had to leave the room and go for a coffee across the street because they were in. Sheldon was so great. It was somebody would call the office. He would say, just a second, I'll see if he's in. And I'm literally sitting 8 inches from him. We're sharing a pencil and one computer. And he would make me wait for like 30 seconds so that the other person would think, I'm very busy in another office, and here we go. So we thought big from the beginning. We worked tirelessly. 14, 16, 18 hours, no question, when we got started with Personal Best. But we were so passionate about what we were doing. And I think when you have a passion for what you do, you don't look at the watch. You don't realize it's 7 o'clock at night and now 8, and now you're up at 5 in the morning to put on a 5K running race or whatever we did over those times. But we loved each other as partners, and we're still together. Sheldon and I and Caron, are well into the 30 plus years of being together. And the greatest thing that ever happened in my life was going to McMaster University, meeting Sheldon, meeting Caron, getting the knowledge that we needed academically, and then setting off into the world to try to make a difference into all kinds of people's lives. And you were one of those, helping you with your marathon. And we've helped people swim across Lake Ontario, ride across Canada, make Olympic teams, work with athletes in wheelchairs. It's been spectacular. I think we looked the other day, we're around 20 plus Olympic athletes we've now helped go to one of the Olympic Games. And, in my case, I got famous because of this young kid, Simon Whitfield, having his Sydney Olympic moment in gold. But, we've worked with the José Chouinards in figure skating and all kinds of interesting people that we've come along the way. But probably more of our joy happens with average geezers like you, letting you say, I remember you and I running our half marathon in Peterborough and the round the bay in Hamilton together. Those are memories that never go away.
Yeah, and you know what? That kind of created a culture of accomplishment for my kids, and I hadn't expected that. Because I remember running the marathon in Ottawa the second time I ran it, and my son at the time, he was only maybe 7 or 8 years old. He ran and walked the 3K for the kids, and Erin was my support team because it got cool that day, so she had her bike, and she needed to deliver me my jacket. So she rode the course to support Dad. But so there's so much more in this book, by the way, called Chasing Greatness, than it is about, the tough miles on the road and all the hard work in the gym. At what point did you think that you had kind of peaked? Because I know when you became the national coach for the triathlon program here in Canada, it wasn't as much as that you were appointed to it. It was that
breathing.
you had almost been the force behind creating it.
Yeah, there's a lot of those things where, if you came along today, there'd be 30 smarter, better looking, brighter, dudes to take that job. I just had one major attribute, my enthusiasm. And, there's a story in the book, for example. It's 1998, 99. We're in the Olympic Games. We have no funds. Sydney's going to be the debut. We have no funds to get started. And my wife and Sheldon pay the bills for a year where I go out to Victoria. I had to get all my Olympic qualification paperwork done. So we move out to Victoria, just me. Caron stays in Ontario. I'm living in residence with 17-year-old kids. And I started a national team program with no money. I went to 1,000 houses and found some people who would take in an athlete for 7 or 8 months into their house. And those athletes eventually, moved into those places for free. We borrowed pool time from the University of Victoria. We found other coaches and massage therapists who donate an hour or two here or there. And that became literally our ongoing program. And so you realize that if you're motivated enough, something is going to come through. And we got lucky. Some parents came through to donate houses and beds, and other coaches donated some hours of pool time. And that's how we got that program off the ground. But a lot of this stuff really comes down to, I'm going to make it happen, stick-to-itness and so forth. And that was one of the key things that came through for us.
Yeah, and I clearly it did, because it ends up with a gold medal in Sydney for Simon Whitfield, and you were like an overnight success.
Yeah, 10-year overnight success. I always love those.
So, but you understate the importance of that skill, that gift that you have, though, and I think to some degree it's contagious, because I certainly pick up on it, and your athletes must be able to pick up on that, because at some point at every turn you're going to run into an athlete that says, I can't do this, Barrie.
It's my wife calls it the Shepley vortex. And I know that if I'm going to ask Dave for 20 things today, Dave is going to say, no stinking way. But if I ask you, just let me borrow your bike for an afternoon for one of my athletes, you say, yeah, I can do that. And then you meet this athlete and you say, wow, that's a great kid. Boy, he doesn't have a bicycle. Maybe you know what? I don't use that bike anymore. Maybe I'll let that kid borrow my bike. And then you see the kid racing a couple months later and you say, you know what? That kid really actually needs a set of race wheels. Maybe 3 or 4 of my buddies can go together and we'll buy a set of race wheels for the kid. And I literally can give you 24 of those exact situations, including a young athlete named Lionel Sanders, who's in the book. He was at rock bottom. He literally had a chain around his neck. He was about to commit suicide. He was involved with drugs. He was depressed. He had dropped out of university. Life was really at the lowest ebb. And eventually I bring him up to where I live up in the Caledon area. One of the families let him stay in his house for the summer. Another athlete donated his bike to him. I got him a scholarship into McMaster University. And 3 years later, he is the national champion. And I'm going to see him, this weekend, where he's the number 2 ranked man in the world. The Hawaii Ironman is only a month from now, and he's come twice now, second at the Hawaii Ironman, and has won 50 races. And his career is incredible. He, bought a house, is married, has a baby on the way. And all that because some people donated a bike, a room, some food, a jacket, an airline ticket. And so I know that I can't do it all ever. And so the success you'll see in the book, and really I think most people who've been successful know that it comes from this collection of people who can contribute a whole bunch of little things which don't seem that big. But in the end, all those little things turn out to be something magical and large. And that's what my wife calls the vortex. And so my job as the kind of ringleader is to keep people inspired, to keep them wanting to be involved. And for the athletes and the people we help, they have to understand there's no such thing as a free lunch. So they come back once they've been successful, and they might donate some money or some time or an equipment or an hour or two to a lesson to a kid. And that's happening just as we speak. On the weekend, I had an elite female who we've been helping. She's come back to help some 14-year-old girls learn how to ride bikes around corners fast. So I don't believe in a free handout, but I believe in helping you get along the way, and then hopefully you're going to help someone else down the road.
Well, the message is, and so often, somebody will thank you and you'll say, well, it's the least I can do. And I always tell people, I love doing the least I can do. So bring it on. But it underlines the importance of paying attention to small things, right? That, in fact, you have no idea the grander effect you may have on someone's life, career, relationship, whatever it might be, just by doing something that really isn't really difficult for you at all. But you have this amplified.
And I know, we actually get more out of this. I mean, I feel good at the end of the day knowing that I've done something modest to help another human being. And there have been people who we've helped through alcoholism, through divorces, through depression, through loss of jobs. We've raised money for, people who literally needed to get back on their feet. And 5 years later, they're making $200,000 a year back in a great job. And they're coming out and helping fundraise for me. There's a story we have of a 70-year-old guy in the book. He's now 74 and literally going to Ironman Maryland this weekend. But he had cancer. We came back from cancer and set a goal of winning the Ironman as a master. And he went under 12 hours. Only 2 people in the world have ever broken 12 hours. We're talking a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, 26-mile marathon as a 70-year-old cancer survivor. And he did all of that. And he's now 74. And we're trying to qualify for Hawaii for next year and become the first 75-year-old to ever break 13 hours. So, I get surrounded by these incredible people every single day. And it's so awesome to be able to just, wake up and be surrounded by motivated people. And some days we have maybe somebody who needs a little kick in the bum and we help them because we know that we all have those days. But, when you get a circle of people who have objectives and goals, it's fantastic. And it's what a great way to lead a life. And, my dad still asks me, what do I do for a living? And
what is it you do?
I'm not sure all these years later, but if you can make it to 60 and not sure what you've done for a living, you probably had a lot of fun along the way.
So is each chapter a story, or do you pull a thread through and give examples and anecdotes? How does the book play out?
Sure. Well, it starts out with, we've all had that one moment that has to change your life. For my moment, I was 19. I'm making minivans, actually large vans in Chrysler in Windsor. So on the assembly line. It's July of 1984. I'm a university student. I got to pay my way to go back to school. And the great Alex Bauman, the phenomenal swimmer, is about to do his magic in LA. And I sneak away from the assembly line. I was putting dipsticks into the engine, and I took 10 dipsticks, went up the line, put them into 10 engines in a row. So I would have about nine or 10 minutes to watch the swim. And I go to the cafeteria and I watch this incredible kid from Sudbury. I think he was 20 or 21, beautiful body. He had the Canadian maple leaf tattooed on his pec. And he wins the gold medal in the 400 IM. And in that 4 minutes and 17 seconds, he changed my life because I saw how a whole factory of people who never said boo to each other. They'd sit for the whole 30 minutes, look at the newspaper, eat their little sandwich out of the lunch bucket, go back to the line. We're hugging and jumping and excited. A Canadian had done something magical. And so that to me said, look, there's something that sport does that maybe only music is the only other thing in the world that can touch a whole bunch of different people. And I wanted to go to the Olympics. And so 16 years later, here I am with Simon Whitfield, a kid that I found when he was 12 years old in a little program that I had started. And we're at Sydney, and he's won the Olympic Games on the second morning. And his life changed forever. My life changed forever. And I felt I had an obligation to kind of continue to give back. Look how lucky I was that my goal had been achieved. I got to the Olympics. I heard the anthem. I was sitting 10 feet from it. And so for the last, better part of 25 years, it's been to really give back to other people so they could experience their Olympic moment. It might not actually be at the Olympics. It could be winning a hockey tournament, getting down on moguls at a ski hill, doing a mud run, what CrossFit competition, whatever the case may be. But whatever gave you that sense of accomplishment is what Sheldon and I and Caron have spent the last 25 years of our life doing. And we raised some money to help some kids who really have some talent, but just don't have the financial wherewithal. And so you just see a chapter after a chapter after a chapter of another average person, somebody who would never consider themselves to have been special at any point. But when they met the Shepley Vortex, they started to believe in themselves. We found some resources, and there they go. They've qualified for Boston. They've got to the finish of a race across America bike ride, whatever the case may be. Of all ages. And in some cases, they don't win, but that's fine. They got there, and that was the win that they were looking for.
The book is called Chasing Greatness, the author Barrie Shepley. And if you want more details, there's a website set up for the book. It's called chasinggreatness.ca. Go there, buy it. And as you tell these stories, it occurs to me, it's one of those things that this is the kind of thing that you will be the victim of your own success, because I'm afraid that someone will read it and say, here, you got to read this book, and it's going to get shared more than it's going to get bought, Barrie.
You know what? I don't care if I sell one book that gets read 1 million times. My wife might say 1 million books read once, but as long as people get inspired and it helps them, go after that, whatever the case may be, it might be read a book or write their own book. It might be do music, whatever. It doesn't have to be sport. And really, as you know, you've been involved in music, in arts your entire life. And, that long journey that it is, one or two become a Justin Bieber, and the other million love what they do, but they don't make their living at doing it. And that's fine as well. Just surround myself with my guitars in my windowless room. So that's my level of excitement. Barrie Shepley, thanks for joining us, and good luck with the book. I appreciate it. We'll have to get out for a nice slow run again to keep that 30-year anniversary going of our running together.
Well, I'm not sure I could keep up with Barrie on a run these days, and I realize we're talking a little slower. The one race that I remember running with him, it was a few though, was the Around the Bay in Hamilton. And again, I had my best time because I was running with the coach, and he wasn't coaching me as we went along, but it was just one of those things where when you are in his presence, it made a difference. But I will say, a number of the workouts I used to go to with him and Caron out at York University, and we'd use the indoor track. And as inspirational and great a coach as Barrie is, it was Caron who kicked our asses. and in a very, kind, happy, light sort of way. But man, she could really make you knuckle down and get the job done. And it was almost as if, well, I can do this. Surely you can do this, right? And it wasn't in a condescending way. There was the two of them combined. Wow, you talk about a power couple when it comes to that kind of stuff. So anyway, please go to personalbest.ca. There's a tribute there to Caron if you want to get involved in the Caron Shepley Animal Foundation. And they're working on that. And just find out more details about her, about Barrie, and maybe you want to order the book, Chasing Greatness. All right, that'll do it for me on this Thursday. It's Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Tomorrow, we're back in the studio. On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast is what keeps us busy on a Friday. And then, we'll be back at it again next week. Hope you do enjoy your long holiday weekend, and happy Thanksgiving. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.